Hello everyone, welcome to Animator's Breakfast. This is a podcast where we talk about inspiration and eat donuts at the exact same time. Ironically, the only person that didn't get donuts on the day I think was Evan, I think.
Evan's super clean living, hardcore. I tried to
He's
get
very
him,
hardcore,
once
yeah.
to give him a Christmas present. He did beautiful work for his son. Wolfwalkers.
Yeah.
You know, there was very little like kind of bold things I could give him. I usually give people a bottle of whiskey or something like that. In the end, I had to give him a print of a dog, you know, because that's just all he cares about.
What else? By the way, that's Tomm Moore.
Hi.
Yeah, who has very generously joined us on the podcast. Tom, as I'm sure you know, is a vegan.
Vegan donut.
Is one of the co-founders of Cartoon Saloon, which is doing amazing work for not just animation worldwide, but also Irish mythology, which is a big part of my heart. So thank you so much for that. You guys, please just never stop. I know that you kind of talk about your three films, like Secret of Kells, which you co-directed with Nora, Song of the Sea, which I'm pretty sure you directed that, but with a lot of help. You're the single credited director, and now you're co-directing Wolfwalkers with Ross Stewart, and that's your kind of trilogy of Cartoon Saloon style.
For me, excuse me, delicious vegan donut. Sorry. Yummy vegan donut. Thank you, Cole.
You're very welcome.
Okay, thank you. That's amazing. That is genuinely my animator's breakfast. Such a healthy breakfast. But anyway, breakfast of champions.
Yeah.
No, I don't like to say Cartoon Saloon style because Cartoon Saloon
I like that.
wasn't called, Tomm Moore or Paul Young or Nora Toomey Productions at all.
What a mouthful, yeah.
Well, yeah, we had one name before Cartoon Saloon. It was Young Tom, when it was just me and Paul working out of our bedrooms.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Young Tom Productions. And then we even decided, no, we don't want anything to do with our names. So that means Cartoon Saloon can evolve and change with the talent. We've got some amazing young talent.
Yeah.
Or, well, younger than me. That doesn't mean you're young. Talent coming up. And I mean, they'll have their own voice and everything.
Absolutely.
So Cartoon Saloon style. So I suppose there's been a continuity of theme and continuity of collaborators across those three.
Nice, yeah.
And Secret of Kells was the feature that we started with. I originally developed it with a guy called Aidan Hart.
Yep.
And then he did Skunk Fu. He's an amazing sculptor, novelist and everything. So right from the beginning, they were all collaborative, but they kind of had themes and styles, and working with the same people again and again, they kind of form a triptych, I think.
Triptych, oh nice, yes. And we're going to talk about one of the younger animators that joined you in a minute.
Yeah.
It's a very Irish thing, I think, and I don't want to generalise, but I'm about to name something after your family name or something.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of like in Britain, all the pubs in Scotland that you see, they all have really interesting names, like the Hangman's Noose or the World's End.
Lettuce and Slug or something.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Whereas this here, it's just Moores or Delaney's or...
Yeah, I actually there's a lovely pub in Kilkenny called O'Riordan's that is in Song of the Sea. I called it O'More's. I changed it to my name. That's the only, but otherwise it's exactly O'Riordan's.
Yeah, so you followed the name after yourself.
No, but I would, it's not like Disneyland or Don Bluth or anything like that. For us, we wanted to be a place, Cartoon Saloon, So it's more the spirit of the place. It's actually a hard question to answer whenever people ask us to kind of, what's the soul of the company? Because anything you'd say...
I'm pretty sure I didn't ask that. But.
No, but we've been asking ourselves these kind of questions, because we're thinking now it started off just trying to make a living, and it started off very kind of collaborative, and now it's quite a business. Yeah. And I think Jerry Sheeran, our managing director, sent us this podcast about what's the soul of a company and how often companies lose their soul when the founders leave because they haven't identified it, and they have to bring back like Steve Jobs or something like that. But so we tried to answer that question. It's really hard because we deliberately tried to make it not any one person's thing.
Yeah.
But, a culture, I think Cottle Gaffney said once that a culture trickles down from the founders whether you mean it to or not. And I think a culture has evolved in the studio that's attracted certain types of people,
People, when you're so fervent saying what you believe, like I say, I stand up there, I believe what I believe. What'll happen is usually if it's a really good message, people will stand behind it and say, I believe what you believe. And it's that kind of culture that falls behind it. There's a really good guy called Simon Sinek, I love his books, who talks about the idea of the infinite game. And that's about building that culture that sustains throughout and it's not about money, it's about the culture.
Yeah.
And obviously you need money to fuel a business.
Yeah, we're thinking about that a lot because we never had money. So the culture was like, you know, fucking making a living. Oh, are you allowed to swear on your podcast? Okay.
Yeah.
It was just about making a living and keeping the lights on. And now we it's so lovely. Like we have about 300 animators in Kilkenny between Lighthouse and we've got like 3 or 4. There'll be 4 locations soon all around Kilkenny, and
you can just rename Kilkenny Cartoon Saloon.
Cartoon or Moore World, you know, like Disney World. You know, no, that's literally the opposite of the idea. Toomey Land, whatever. But Paul would be like Tiernan Oak. No, if you use Paul, it'd be Tiernan Oak. It'd be nice, wouldn't it? Yeah. Anyway, no, we're not doing that. But we have kind of slightly taken over, and it's great because there's also a lot of vegetarians and vegans. All the restaurants are, we've tofu, come here, you know. All the restaurants are competing for the hipster dollar. But you know, it's nice. I mean, I grew up in Kilkenny, and it definitely has a culture of creativity and stuff in the town anyway, or the city, I'm always reminded to say. And having all these new kind of animators from all over the world is, you know, there is a culture evolving, whether we intend to or not, but we're very protective that it doesn't become something else. Yeah. And especially with us also spread out and so many different projects and different people and stuff. Yeah. That's why we're asking ourselves those questions.
Yeah, good. Anyway. It's all down to trust, really, isn't it? You know, trust that you set up the right culture and everything, that people will, you know, be able to and help people kind of overcome the short-term challenges and focus on culture. Anyways,
I think leadership, I think the people that you kind of promote and put in charge of projects and stuff is very important too, that they understand the culture, because it can change in a time. And I'd say there could be like a room in the building I'm in that's running another project that has probably a palpably different culture just by the director and stuff. But I think they're all relatively aligned. I think.
Okay. Well.
Why are we talking about this?
Yeah,
Sorry.
I don't know. I've gone off track. It's something I'm really interested in.
Yeah, it is interesting. Yeah. Maybe it is interesting for people to think about at the moment. People who are working in animation.
Actually, let's forget about what we chose as a topic.
No.
No. Speaking of topic, why don't you introduce what you've chosen to talk about?
I mean, I'm always talking about the influence of Miyazaki and Richard Williams, especially his approach and attitude of fearing no style, and his approach to trying to make the thief and the cobbler. Yeah. And I'm sort of bored listening to myself talking about it.
Do you know, you said that in a text and I was like, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, you know, I've sort of said it a lot.
There's been a lot said.
Yeah, and they are amazing, and they were a huge influence on me. But I actually realised a couple of years ago that Adrien Merigeau, just one of the many amazing, talented younger directors, and I mean, he's 36 or 7 now. So, but to me, he's still younger than me. So he's always young, you know. He's always a kid. He looks like a kid as well. He's amazingly youthful. Yeah,
it's the French blood, you know.
Yeah, what is it? I don't know. But he's one of the many talents that we've come across. But I realised he's been a major collaborator. Like, he was the art director on Song of the Sea. When the studio was very tiny, he was one of just 10 or 15 people. We met him in 2003, and his short film that he'd done in college just blew my socks off. It was just exactly the Carnet de Chloe, and it was just exactly the kind of thing I'd been rabbiting on about, and he keeps doing this to me. This is why I want to talk about it. I just recently was in Angers in the film festival, and I saw his latest film, Genius Lucky, and I remember him talking about it while we worked on Song of the Sea. I think he was working on it for about 4 years, but I'm forever waffling on in interviews and stuff that hand-drawn animation in particular, or animation in general, is an art form that can use the language of all the visual art form. It doesn't have to mimic live action. And Adrien just always one-ups me. Like anything, I'm always, we saw Princess Kaguya, and I was like, oh, let's do something like that in Wolfwalkers. But then I saw Genius Lucky a couple of weeks ago, and I went, there he's doing it again. Like, he's really doing something that can only be done in animation. And I love that. I always really appreciate that. Like, I love Chris Ware's comics.
Okay.
And he does things that could only be print comics. They wouldn't even work online. And he just makes such a virtue of the medium. Okay. And calls attention to it in a way that supports the narrative and allows himself to do something different. And those are the kind of artists I'm really impressed by, you know. And I think for Adrien, he just has a style. And coming back to culture, his way of directing was a big influence on me. When I saw him directing Old Fangs in the studio, and I saw the way he trusted people and delegated, he had a clear vision, and he touched nearly every frame, but yet he had people come in and he let them draw little bit off model,
Yeah.
but as long as the heart was, he had he's kind of an anarchist. His parents are avant-garde musicians and they do all the soundtracks for his films, and
Wow.
he just brings a different sensibility than the kind of the stuff that we hear all the time in animation about story. There's kind of a story science now, which is all great, and almost like John Lasseter and Walt Disney have had this huge influence on everybody, their ideas, and it's just wonderful to see somebody coming left of field and doing something different.
Yeah, I'd never started. No, that was amazing.
Sorry, it's a waffle.
Yeah, but this is the whole point of this podcast. We've got another while to waffle, as they say. When you first kind of said about Adrien, I'd come across his work obviously through Cartoon Saloon, of course.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen his college film. Was it the Carnet de Chloe?
Carnet de Chloe, yeah. And I was just looking at it, and some of the characters in Old Fangs are in the Carnet de Chloe.
Oh, really?
And it's really interesting. His style was there then. He just has this amazing ability to draw, like, very sophisticated, very nuanced, but not art schooly. It's like a kid who never stopped drawing. I love his kind of style. And it already had lots of bits of his visual language in there. And what I loved was that the techniques were so free. Like, what I love about comic books is that from one panel to the next you can use a totally, it could be a painting, then it could be just a black and white sketch, or you can go really far. And there's this kind of thing in college in Ballyfermot where that's not feature quality. Feature quality is this and this. And I'm amazed that, and it's young artists like Adrien and younger that are like pushing it out and showing that animation can actually mess around with techniques and styles all in the same narrative, and that can actually boost the narrative rather than alienate the viewer. Which I think is something unique to animation.
Yeah, and something like, as well, like Old Fangs, which is what I've seen. I haven't seen Genius Look because it's doing the rounds on festivals.
Just starting the festivals,
But I did see the teaser of it, and it looked fantastic.
It's
really beautiful.
An evolution of all the stuff he's done music videos and stuff. Even stuff we did in Secret of Kells and Song of the Sea that Adrien brought to it. Is all kind of, his visual language is sharpening and sharpening.
Wow.
But I mean, where I was showing him, like on Song of the Sea, I was showing him Newgrange carvings and things like that. And then he would show me like Klee and Kandinsky or Miro and things like that. So there was kind of like a modern art sensibility. And then he loves John Cage, the composer. So he brings a whole other approach to thinking, like, and even a kind of minimalist sensibility where I'd be nervous not to make the whole screen be full of stuff. He has this like, line, just the right line in the right place is enough. So there's bravery in that too.
And I think it's really interesting you talk about music as an influence, because his films, like even from Old Fangs, from what I see, it's very musical in its visual language. It really is. Like the use of line, like you said, is fantastic. Even those little boiled lines and everything. But the light and the colour use is just phenomenal.
That's what blows me away as well. He's an amazing photographer. And he takes beautiful photos, but he has this like really like a graphic doesn't mean anything, but he has this very like a stylized way of drawing, but then he lights it with the knowledge of a photographer. And so that's what I loved in Song of the Sea, for example, where on Kells we were really going for a kind almost like a tapestry or a very flat sort of look. He was able to take that kind of stylized way of drawing that we'd evolved on Kells and then add an attitude to lighting and atmosphere that was really unusual, and again, something that can only be done in hand-drawn. But what's most interesting are the bits in between the narrative. Like when you see Genius Locky, it has a narrative, but in between the narrative, there's this almost psychedelic or stream of conscious way of just treating the screen that you get. It's always entertaining because it's so beautifully done. You don't get alienated and go, oh, what the hell is this? I'm lost. There's still enough narrative in it, but it's a totally different way of telling a story that uses notions of like your subconscious or contemplative way of looking at things. Sorry, it's a little bit like dancing about architecture, talking about art sometimes. How do you put words, into
an emotion?
When we try to describe the ineffable, we F it,
Where'd you learn that quote? Is that your own?
I read it in some. I read it in some book about psychedelics, I think.
Yeah, but again, like my only point of reference with Adrien, apart from the art direction on Song of the Sea, and I'm lucky enough that I'm able to approach this now that I made my video about you and Cartoon Saloon. It's coming up on 4 years now. Oh my God. I was able to research all that then, and that's when I first really started coming across Adrien, because you mentioned him a lot in your interviews about the art direction and everything like that. Even, I think there was a Guardian list where like you already
that was
know.
the last time I did that. Yeah. He was he was embarrassed.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, basically, the Guardian article is asked the animators to pick their influences, and you picked Adrien, and you talked about his work again, which is really, really sweet. But again, it kind of shows that he's a really worthy rival. Is a tough term, but I think it fits it in a sense that it really inspires you to push forward your art form.
Well, we've had like Julian Renard, Paul Morris, Louise Bagnall, Alan Holly, a lot of people, and Evan McNamara, all really inspiring, And I'm lucky to work with them, But Adrien in particular, I think maybe it's just the longevity. Meeting him in 2003, he sort of, we keep on coming around again,
Osmosis into your inspiration. Yeah.
But when I looked at Old Fangs again there in preparation for this, there's stuff that. The aspect to aspect stuff, I don't know who started that first, but I love it and I always talk about it. And I thought I got it from Scott McCloud's book about understanding comics, where or from Uzo.
Do you mean aspect in regards to chopping it down?
Well, if you ever see Tokyo Story, they don't do a big sweeping establishing shot. Yeah. They kind of show little pieces of a place. Like, so they might, if we were in here, you'd show a microphone and, the monitor or whatever. You'd show little bits and then show the overall thing. Or maybe never show the overall thing, just piece together the location with little glimpses, almost like a child's point of view, like little details.
That's nice.
I don't know who started it first, but he's been doing it and I've been doing it for, so that kind of thing is really interesting to look at, and the amount of influence, there.
That shares between the two of you.
Yeah, hopefully. Or maybe I'm just robbing everything from Adrien. He's the real
talent. Turns out he's not inspired by you at all. He's just like,
we had a joke actually when we were doing all the designs for Song of the Sea, and I was still very much in Secret of Kells mode, and I was drawing the spirals and stuff, and then I was like, Adrien, you just naturally draw like these megalithic carvings, and I was like, maybe your ancestors carved these stones, and he said, and maybe your ancestors were standing there going, maybe move that spiral over a little bit. The cross-pollination is happening in animation anyway. Like, I find it very flattering when I notice a little bit of Cartoon Saloon or our style creeping into student films and things like that, because we borrowed a lot from the people that came before us as well. But I think it is interesting to keep on refreshing your influences too, and to look outside of animation. Like, if you're only going to always be influenced by Walt Disney or Hayao Miyazaki, you just end up repeating yourself. Whereas looking outside to contemporary art or looking to music or whatever, anything else outside of the animation, that allows us to keep on enriching the palette that we work with.
Yeah, and especially drawing from life, really, I think is I don't know if I'm putting words in your mouth, is what you mean. Because even if we use, let's say, Miyazaki as an example, he doesn't really like animation at all. he hates the medium.
Does he like anything?
I don't know. He's such a grumpy old man. He reminds me of my granddad.
Anime was a mistake.
Yeah.
I love it.
Animation was a mistake. He's just sitting there having tea. But it's because he's just able to sit and observe from a child's point of view that you're able to get these really nuanced, beautiful characters out of it. Like even on Princess Mononoke, the fact that I remember reading like his book. I know we're supposed to be talking about Adrien, but I'm going on a side note. Reading his book where he had like a memo note about the pitch for Mononoke. And it basically said something like, even though this is a boy meets girl story, that's not the story. It's about humans and the environment completely. And at the end of the film, the girl might say to Ashitaka, I love you, but I can't forgive humanity. And he's like, that's grand, sure, let's go live together in the woods. That kind of thing. And it's completely left of field compared to, let's say, animation now or anime, where I recently saw Makoto Shinkai's newest one, Weathering with You, which is really beautiful.
But so in the language of
did
live
you watch
action.
it?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But again, it falls into anime tropes, like girl meets boy and this kind of like super, hyper emotional kind of stuff.
I think I'd have more, I think Miyazaki and Adrian's very influenced by Fooly Cooley and Cat Soup and some of the more far out, but definitely Japanese animation had a bigger influence on him than on me. I only discovered Japanese animation properly in my teens and in college, you know. And I remember like seeing Akira and stuff, but it wasn't the main influence. Whereas I talked to Adrien about this, and I suppose it's more the spiritual side of Miyazaki's work that influenced us more.
Nice.
But his technique is, he's kind of one of those artists that uses more or less the same style to tell all his stories over and over again. And what I found really interesting, and what I find interesting about animation, is that you have a range of stuff you can dip into. So I think the spiritual part would have and the relationship to nature and the things he talks about and his subtlety, the way he doesn't, you know, follow a story science rule book when he writes his stories. We would have that in common. But I'm quite excited by when I look at, say, Adrian's work, and when Adrian shows me stuff like Cat Soup or Fooly Cooley or any of that some Japanese animators are just pushing it way further. Like if you see like Mind Game or something like that where you're able to use everything that animation can do. And then, you know, the problem I find is sometimes that is only used for comedy. Or super quirky stuff, or super abstract stuff. But when it's actually something subtle, like Adrien often works with really subtle little moments and just captures almost in a poetic way little moments, almost like in a Terrence Malick kind of way. And then you use the full range of animation techniques and styles, or even a bit of live action he uses sometimes, and you kind of create a dreamlike narrative.
Dreamlike is great. It's very dreamlike,
and it's more like little snippets. Like the aspect to aspect might be looking at different parts of a room to set up a place, but something about Adrian's work is he kind of uses different techniques and different ways of representing things to build up a feeling of how a place feels, rather than illustrating it down to every detail. Like in Weathering with You, to me it's amazing, it's beautiful, it's crazy, but it's a live action sensibility. You know,
animation is really about boiling it down to what connects with you. You know what I mean? And like, again, like you said earlier, like one line on a paper or something can mean something. I remember, I think I was watching Adrian's video for Villagers, you know, the song, and it has that kind of spiraling, just little lines coming out.
That's the stuff.
And you can still even kind of leaves in lines of paper and everything that you've animated in. And it doesn't detract away from it at all. It just enriches the experience. You know?
And that's what I think the first film, Carne, was really what we were talking about, because when we set up the studio, at least me and most of us were talking about reacting to, you know, I think Nora.
At least me and most of us.
I don't want to speak for Nora and everything, because even Nora, I think, has other influences and is interested more in live action and other things. But at least what I was waffling on about, whether or not everybody else agreed or not, I was waffling on that like CG now had done what photography had done to painting, you know, and there was no point going down that path anymore. And after photography came in, painting just shattered into all these different attempts to see what painting could do. And you go all the way to Jackson Pollock, or you have impressionists, expressionists and everything. And so Adrian's short film was based on a notebook, a carnet. So every page had a slightly different technique and way of drawing. And so he's telling the story of this little girl and traveling through very old fangs characters and stuff. But you'd go from one scene to the next and it would be super realistic life drawing, or it could be really pared down to just a couple of dots for the eyes, and you still followed the emotional journey of this little character. And this is what I keep coming back to, he was using all the different styles and techniques at his disposal. And then sometimes in his later films he's even brought in, like, kind of, if you see Genius Locky, there's a little guest stars and you can recognise, like, Alan Holly has done a little bit, you know, in
like they've worked on it.
They've made a little piece of it, and they didn't just like animate it in Adrian's style. They took Adrian's characters or storyboards or whatever, and then animated it in their style. And it's actually beautiful because it's another interpretation. It's like that crazy thing when you see somebody like an actor taking on different roles, or you know, it's always so interesting to watch, and it brings another richness to it. You know,
one thing I didn't know about Old Fangs was that Alan worked on it. I think he co-directed it, or something. That's the title, but whatever. What I really love about that is it just at the end it says made by, and then a list of people,
and that was a big influence on me too. Adrian's whole approach to things, which is again coming back to the Cartoon Saloon thing, a very different attitude.
Are you getting rid of credits completely?
I always think credits are a funny thing because people get really wound up about them, and I understand they're important, but like, you know, we don't have any credits on this donut box. You know, I don't know who designed it. It's a cool design.
Yeah,
Nobody's name is on it, you know, and nobody expects to get credit. And like, you drive a car and a million amazing people contributed to the development of it. Where do you stop?
Yeah.
And so people who care about it will know.
Yeah.
That's what I think. And people who care about credits will know. But otherwise, you know, they're almost impossible to capture everything somebody brings. And sometimes people can get over-credited, and it's hard to come up with a title, you know?
Yeah, I think even on Ponyo, they just had, at the end had that kind of made by, and then all the names, and everyone drew a little symbol for themselves, you know? And I think you're right, because like, how do you quantify what someone brings to a project based on a title?
And coming back to culture as well, I think
we're going full circle
but that's
here.
what I thought Adrien brought in Old Fangs.
Yeah.
We were a tiny studio at the time, and he had that kind of attitude of, if everyone feels that they're all filmmakers, they don't zone in and go, well, at least my scene is brilliantly animated. You see yourself as a filmmaker, you know. So you're part of making this greater thing altogether, rather than you know, just doing your little bit and getting lost in that.
When was Old Fangs made originally? When
10 years ago, I guess. It was done in between Kells and Song of the Sea. Yeah. I mean, Genius Lucky, Adrian's been working on for like 4 or 5 years. Yeah. And I've met him at different points while he was working on it, and it's evolved all the way along. And I remember the first script, and I was going to do a bit of it, and I never had time. And, you know, but the way it ended up on screen was really interesting, because it wouldn't have looked like that if he'd made it when he started. Like, you know, even though it nearly killed him to work on it for 4 years. He ended up down in Valence in Follimage with a small team. But so much of it is hand painted on paper, and it's so painstaking. But that's an entertainment value. Like, if animation was only about story, we could just do it all like South Park. You know, we could just do the simplest, cheapest technique you could find. But animation is also about how. Like, a drawing of a chair is different than a photo of a chair, and everybody will draw the chair differently. You know, Adrien said that. I'm kind of quoting him now. But we talked about this a lot, that like the idea that something has to be animation-y to be animated. It doesn't have to be cartoony or even objects coming alive or anything like that. It just needs to have the sense of the person drawing it. Their soul will come through in it. And I think that's what makes that kind of animation and art in general that I respond to the most, is just that you're seeing something of the person coming through in it.
Which is kind of hard in 3D, because you don't really see the stamp of the person anymore. I think personally it's getting better, because you're just dealing with a model that someone else has kind of designed.
Isn't it interesting how you're seeing how they're struggling to get back to that? Like, I loved Spider-Verse. I thought it was deadly. It was so cool. But you can see that they were using digital techniques to try and come back to a handmade look and all the expressiveness of a handmade comic book thing, which is really interesting, because it's the natural evolution, of course. You know, you go all the way to photorealism, and you see things like the Lion King, CG Lion King, and you're like, okay, well, that's a dead end at a certain point. And so even photographers now are using filters and Photoshop, and you know, everyone's playing around. That's the other thing that's interesting about Adrian's work. He always keeps an organic feel to his look, the look of his films. Even though he does use the computer quite a lot, and he's quite clever about how you can use After Effects and Photoshop to enhance it, but it always feels like you're getting a peek inside someone's sketchbook. I remember Steve McCarthy told me the story that Adrien never shows anyone a sketchbook, but he's constantly drawing in it, which is very inspirational too. But Steve McCarthy was another one of the artists working on Song of the Sea. He's a brilliant illustrator in his own right, and he says he looked through Adrien's sketchbook, and then he just fucking threw it against the wall in frustration, because every single page was lovely. You know, usually sketchbooks it's usually a pleasure to look at someone's sketchbook, because you kind of, it's like reading their diary almost. The sketchbook can be quite private, you know. But typically Adrian's, every page was beautiful.
I don't know what he takes from his sketchbook and puts on his website, because his website is just like an explosion of beautiful rendered sketches and illustrations and little gifs of movement. So I don't know what he takes from that and puts
I don't know how intellectual or how intuitive it is, and sometimes you feel like you're effing it by asking too much, or you're just supposed to take it like music. You don't try to go, what's this music supposed to be? It either gives you a feeling or it doesn't, and I think that's a really interesting thing. I think there's a tendency in animation to get a bit like psychoanalytic, and I know,
it's hard to steer away from it.
And I was all into that, and Jung and the hero's journey and all that stuff, and it still informs my work to a huge degree. But artists like Adrien and Julian is the cutest thing ever. Julian Reynard made Somewhere Down the Line, and just this morning on the train, I watched the Carnet de Chloe again, and underneath there was a comment on Vimeo where Julian Reynard goes, "Oh, this is so amazing. I hope to meet you someday. Do you work in Cartoon Saloon?"
No
It's so cute to see that, and he's become an amazing filmmaker in his own right.
Somewhere down the line is beautiful.
Yeah, and he was a big part of Song of the Sea as well.
Yeah.
I remember Adrien got really jealous because I was always complimenting Julian's stuff. He goes, "Oh, he's the baby Jesus of Cartoon Saloon," because he can't do anything wrong. So
you forced him out the door then, and
Julian got called the baby Jesus for a while.
And what did you call Adrien?
Yeah, I don't know, the Holy Ghost or something. I don't know.
Spiritus Sancti. Yeah. So you obviously must have a link to these, like through his Vimeo, that you can just kind of go and see, like La Carne de Chloe. And
they're all up there online.
Are they really?
You can see a good body of his work. Like you've got the Carne de Chloe's there on Vimeo. The music video.
I'm better than this, Tom.
The music video he did for Villagers. I want people to seek it out. Actually, it's part of why I want to talk about his work. Is I hope
because seek it out.
When I listened to Evan's one, he was talking about that.
Which the penny,
yeah. I mean, it's deadly. I'd never seen that before. And I go around waffling. Oh yeah, Eastern European animation is a big influence, but I've only seen a fraction of it.
The Keshkemid film school,
exactly. Yeah. So that's it. You know, it's so interesting to discover new stuff. So people should go online and have a look for Adrian's stuff.
Please do. You can find Old Fangs, I know, on the Cartoon Saloon YouTube, and probably on Adrian's Vimeo as well. Yeah,
and he has a music video he did for Villagers, which is very interesting, and for Jennifer Evans. So some really nice stuff. Because for a while, Adrien had a company with Alan called And Maps and Plans.
Amazing work. Yeah, their stuff is mind blowing. Yeah. Like Coda,
so gorgeous.
The Island as well.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, and they're kind of a school. There's kind of a
very similar.
Yeah, and there's a generation of them. Remember Kieran Duffy and Louise and people like that. They're you can see a generation of people and their influences. They all have very much their own style, but we were really lucky to get to collaborate with them all at a certain point.
You've got a really good I know we're going back to culture again, but I was down in Kilkenny for when James Baxter was there, and I've got to say, like, the culture in Kilkenny for animation is beautiful, because everyone's just kind of really honest and open about their influences and what they love. It's not about like technical this blah blah blah, this programmer blah blah blah, whatever. It's like, oh, did you see, I think everyone was talking about Klaus at the time, oh, did you see Klaus? Can't wait till you see it, the lighting is amazing and look at this and blah blah blah. And when they were talking to James Baxter, they were so happy about, and there's just that kind of love of art as a form rather than how do I solve a problem? Do you know that kind of way? Which is something that I'm going to get in trouble. I'm not going to say it. No, I will. It's something I find, like, where I work, it can be like there's incredible artists, but they tend to focus a lot on the technical aspects of it. I
mean, that's fair enough as well, because I think it's sometimes the most important thing is doing a good job reliably and consistently. Like sometimes that's what you need to do for certain projects. And I think some studios, that's why we partnered with Mercury Filmworks, because we were so impressed with the actual quality of the work they were doing, but the way they were able to produce it consistently and reliably was something that had eluded us for 20 years. So they partnered with us on Lighthouse, and they brought in some of their systems from Canada, which is useful too in its own way. But I think the heart of a lot of the projects in Saloon are more on the art side of it,
because it's so lovely to see someone excited to talk about what they love. Do you know what I mean? And that's infectious, and of course you want to be part of that, and you want to just take them and follow them, and so well done for helping
that's
create that.
We've been lucky. We've managed to attract a certain kind of person, and certain people seem to be attracted to the Saloon, and more and more it's like a funnel, and it's narrowing. Like one of the very first people that we came up and was hanging out when we were still part of the Young Irish Filmmakers was David O'Reilly. And he's gone off and done his own stuff with CG. But again, I see some similarities in us, because he's always using CG for what CG can do rather than for trying to make something hyper realistic or pretending that it's live action. So there is something, and he's an amazing draftsman himself as well. So there's some connection between a lot of the people we've worked with. I hope I'm not straining it too far, but there seems like
really throwing the lasso out there and hoping it catches on to something. It was one of the biggest. I remember coming back afterwards and be like, oh my god, Kilkenny is crazy. And I'm from near Kilkenny. I'm from Laois, like 20-minute drive away from Kilkenny, but I don't go there anymore. Not because it's because my attention is turned where I live now in Dublin.
Right.
Again, I think it's a really nice thing to see that there's a cultural hub that people are attracted to in Ireland for animation. Like there's people that I talk to from around the world, and they all know Cartoon Saloon when it comes to animation, and they all love Song of the Sea and Secret of Kells. Usually Song of the Sea first, because that's like the bigger one, the more recent one that everyone knows. Yeah. And then Secret of Kells as well. Yeah. They just are so attracted to that.
I think because we focused on Irish stories for those two, and we're in Ireland, I think internationally people think of that way. But I mean, Nora's doing a film, like she did Breadwinner, which obviously
amazing.
And again, totally different approach in some ways, but other people go, oh, it's a Cartoon Saloon style. I go, how is it? She's got such a different
I think it's the round heads.
It's the roundy heads. I don't know.
I think that's it.
There's something in there. And now she's doing a film for Netflix called My Father's Dragon. And that's like huge. We just have an amazing writer who worked on it, Meg LaFave, just gave a story workshop yesterday.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, and so that's totally different in a totally different direction, but hopefully people will still follow us, you know, even when we stray away from Irish folklore. Of course, I'm in the middle of Wolfwalkers now with
Are
Ross.
there round heads in Wolfwalkers?
Round heads? I don't know. The heads roundy, I guess so. I mean, a lot of the character design and stuff still continues on from what we did before. Yeah. But we actually, I'd been doing a lot of the character design for Wolfwalkers, and I was fairly happy with it. But an Italian, this is links a bit to Adrien too. An Italian guy came on an internship, and he had a style that wasn't too far from us, but he was bringing it in another direction. Yeah. So all the characters passed through Federico then, you know. Yeah. And it was sort of like that with Adrien. He came in, and Ross and I had been working on it, and Barry Reynolds and Jeremy Purcell, lots of people had been working on the style for a long time. And then Adrien came in to Secret of Kells and brought something from the outside, and he was like an intern. He was like 23 or something at the time, and then he ended up becoming a major part of the studio. So we kind of, I think because we started in Young Irish Filmmakers, we've kind of always had these enthusiastic young people who may not have a lot of experience or whatever, production chops, but they bring something, a little flair that keeps us going in different directions. And so hopefully with Wolfwalkers, like in Breadwinner, it's a departure, but it'll be familiar, you know?
Yeah, hopefully.
God, I hope so. People will go, yawn, he's repeating himself.
This is a disaster. Look at this.
Yeah, here it is again.
It's just reused animation.
Imagine that. You know when you see the Disney videos and you're like, oh my God, they cheated the audience. You know, never cheat the audience, kid. And then you see like Mowgli is the little boy from Winnie the Pooh, Christopher Robin. They're the same animation traced over.
Robin Hood and the dance.
Yeah, it's all the same.
I'm going to be looking out for it now. So
no, unfortunately we didn't get away.
Unfortunately, we put in too much.
And we borrowed
hard work.
a little bit from Adrien by bringing in Evan McNamara and it's doing special sequences that I'm really excited about because they're the most hand-drawn thing we've done and they're the most 3D thing we've ever done. Wow. So it's going to be really interesting.
I won't talk about it. I think you showed me a part of it, but I won't say for good reason. This is a public forum, right? I want to talk about the use of colour and stuff like that because it's I don't know how else to describe it. It's kind of delicious to experience, like again in Old Fangs, really beautiful tones of that sunset as they kind of drive to the forest and the idea of the young wolf going back through, you know, the old forest he used to live in. They ask him, do you remember this? And he's like, no, none of it feels familiar until he comes across the water. And it's like, I don't know if it's a metaphor of like water having memory. I could be reading too much into it. Who knows? But when they go inside the house with the father wolf and then it's just suddenly yellow and black.
And it's so stark and such a different style with just a little snout coming in. It's so powerful and so brave. Really brave. That's what I mean by whenever he showed me how you can be brave and not feel like nervous and have to fill the whole screen with interesting things. Like just the texture of that background and the little door and the snout coming in is perfect.
And even shots of the like father wolf. He's fully in frame, but he's not fully in frame. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's just that kind of confidence, I think, in, I don't know, you said bravery, but my God, really just...
It's arranging, it's the modern art approach of arranging the elements within the frame to give a sense, rather than thinking of them as little puppets on a stage or little actors in a live action stage. You're actually playing with the screen in a very pure way, you know. And the colour, Adrien's use of colour, I think it's just an intuitive talent he has because I don't think he overly analyses it, but he does colour sketches and does a colour script for everything he does. And they're always so beautiful to look at because they're like these little mini masterpieces in a row. It's always so exciting to see.
From what I can see in his work, like that's one thing I struggle with is colour theory, and I'm always trying to overthink it and complementary colour, blah blah blah. But if it's an intuitive thing, like how enriching must that be to just go, okay, purple. I remember one of the shots in Old Fangs that really spoke to me is just them walking through the field, and you can see the stretch of the shadow coming across this beautiful yellow
like
wheat or something like that. And I just paused and I was just sitting looking at it for a long time, and I think it's that painterly kind of like, and it's stuff that I see in let's say Secret of Kells, and I've talked about it in my video, but even Song of the Sea, that one shot I think you promoted a lot, but with like the badgers set.
Oh
Is it a
yeah,
set?
yeah.
While they're walking through, like that use of space differently is so
that's a nice example actually,
interesting,
because that was based on a storyboard that no, it was based on a concept piece that Ross Stewart did.
Okay.
Then it was sequence was storyboarded by Julian Renard, and then of course Adrien had a final touch on it, and it's lovely to see all the, like, that's where I think we're informing each other in the way we're thinking about the screen in a different way.
And in different ways, a really good thing. It's not just like, and it's not against the use of negative space. Like, there is negative space that forces your eye in, but it's just like, okay, their journey is whatever, they're having a good time, but look at all this that's happening around
It's
them.
a different way of thinking about the screen and composition and stuff, and maybe it rewards repeat viewing. I hope so anyway.
No. Imagine, no, it absolutely does, yeah. Of course, that's why these things are...
Trying to get people to come back and pay for a second ticket or something, I don't know.
Well, maybe you should run it again. It probably costs way too much money.
We actually had a lovely retrospective of all the films in France about 2 weeks ago.
Wow, yeah.
I was there with Adrien because he was showing his film at it too. And it was a real kick to show the films again. Like, Kells is over 10 years old.
Yeah.
And it took 10 years to get made.
Yeah.
And we showed it to a full audience. Some children probably weren't born when it came out.
Wow,
you
God.
know?
Imagine.
And so that's a nice thing. That's something that we always go for, I think, with the organic look and stuff. We try and go for something timeless. Yeah. Because, you know, Bambi still looks great.
It does look great.
But Toy Story 1 looks a bit ropey. Because the animation, the story's great, but the animation has moved on. The CG techniques have moved on, you know. So I think you can kind of have something timeless when you.
Timeless is great, and especially like with Adrien's work as well, because it doesn't fit into a box of like, oh, it's this time. Yeah, you know, it's really, it stands like, you could watch something like Old Fangs, or hopefully when I see Genius Loki, Genius Loki, is it?
It's the spirit of a place.
Okay,
it just means the spirit of
location.
A place.
Yeah. When I see that, like, I won't be able to date it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's a really enriching thing.
Or at least it won't seem
like something else.
Dated whenever you watch it in 50 years, because the look and feel of handmade mark making is kind of timeless. You know? Whereas technology, software is always improving. If you're always chasing reality, stuff that seems hyper real. It's amazing to me that CG visual effects that looked hyper real to me in the early 2000s look so dated. You know?
Crap.
Yeah, it's mad.
It's like, how did I believe this at all?
Yeah.
You know what's really good actually as well? Jurassic Park, like that. I don't know, it just does not look dated.
Do you know what it is? Because they used the sensibility of practical effects. Even though they were using CG, they were using lighting and stuff where they used to have to do it to hide the fact that it was made out of latex or whatever, you know. They still use that, and now everything is fully lit and everyone's showing off every texture that they've rendered and blah blah. So. Yeah,
it's very different. For Adrien's work, please do go and find it. Online. Tom is a huge proponent of it. I am not as big as him, but now I am, because the work is phenomenal. Like we've talked about, it is just it's better than Tom's work.
I was about to say, then you'll figure out that he's the real genius of the whole.
He's pulling all the strings.
Tom is just a total fraud.
Could you imagine? Tom, we've talked a lot about your success. You know, let's talk about some of your failures. I heard you fell through a chair in the summer. Did that really happen?
Yeah, did you not see the GIF?
No.
I made a GIF of it and put it on Twitter. It was so funny because it was captured on video.
Oh no.
It was great. Just lay off the vegan tone.
Yeah.
But it was pure comedy gold, because when I went through the GIF, it was pure animation. Because there's a moment where you realise that I realise that I'm falling, and it's quite late. The chair is gone from beneath me, and I'm still perfectly happy. The legs are gone, and I broke the chair, like, and it just collapses underneath me. And it's like there's like a Wile E. Coyote moment where I'm just like sitting suspended in there, and then I fall. It's very funny.
Well, I'm glad you studied it like a real animator. Went through your own stuff. Tom, I think we can leave it there under pressure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Cole. I'm glad I got on.
Oh, me too. Oh, listen, it's really nice to see again these perspectives, and that's the most amazing thing about this, is like, usually when someone suggests something, I probably haven't seen it, which is really nice. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll leave it there.
Thank you. That was nice.
Yeah.
I hope it was interesting.
No, I'm going to delete it all. Really, yeah, it was
See
really
what you can get out of it. It comes down to like a 5-second clip. Called, "You are really great."
It's like it's South Park.